Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, here we are. We're already in the month of June. We're getting ready for the SHRM National Conference, and I have a special guest for you today as I'm getting to talk to Chad Sorenson. Chad is the president at Adaptive HR Solutions. He's also a former president at HR Florida. And Chad, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Bruce. It's so great to be here. I've heard a lot about your podcast, and so I wanted to make sure that I was able to get in on one.
Well, I'm glad you're on today. We were talking offline, and I'm usually in studio today in my office, and I mentioned, hey, I got to adapt today, and it's perfect for adaptive. As we're going to talk about adaptive HR solutions. But before we do that, I always like to reflect with my guests on when I met them or when they came into my path at some time. And for you, it's been through the SHRM circles, through a VLBM. We've got a chance to know each other. I think the last time, though, tell me, we were at VLBM, and I think we saw each other at dinner. Was that George's in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, it was. It was at Georgia's Southern Brown food. It was awesome.
It
It was
was,
awesome.
it was so fantastic. That was so much fun.
We
So,
go to Washington and we got all this food there, and what do? We go back to
uh,
Southern cooking.
I love it, man. I love it. Go back to your roots. I love it. Well, let's talk about adaptive HR solutions. I would love for you to share a little brief highlight of your organization and how you serve your customers.
16 years ago during the Great Recession that we had,
Mm,
I found myself available and to do other work. After having to let go about a third of the workforce of the company that I was at, the CEO
mm,
came into my office one day and said, "Hey, Chad, can I
mm.
have a conversation with you?" And I said, "Sure. Would you like me to teach you how to do this?" He goes, "Yes, because I haven't laid anyone off." I said, "Right. I've done all the dirty work." So we ended up losing a bunch of our workforce, including myself. And a couple of days later, someone called me and said, "Hey, I hear you're available. We need some consulting work."
Hmm.
I hadn't told anyone. Someone just found out and had told someone else, and word started to spread. And after about 2 weeks and starting to pick up clients without telling anyone what I was doing, I figured that's what I needed to do. And that was 16 years ago.
Wow.
So June, I celebrate 16-year anniversary of Adaptive HR Solutions.
I love that.
It's awesome, and I started it because I wanted to help small and mid-sized businesses,
Mm,
whether it's through the compliance side, because they don't know the first thing. For some business owners, I teach them how to spell HR,
okay.
and for others, they already have a good grasp of it, but they need either that secondary level, that strategic level, or they need some assistance in some other areas. And over the time, I've been able to really grow that and have a great leadership development practice as part of it. I've got that standard HR consulting or the employee relations. Hey, I've got this big problem. How do I do that?
Mm, mm,
But what I find a lot of joy in is when I get to work with an organization over time and really develop a program that will help move the needle for
mm.
their manager. I had one client call me one day. He says, "Chad, I've got 40 managers and I've got 20 of them I want to fire today. I can't stand them. They're no good. They can't do anything. They don't know how to do it. And
Mm.
I'm just frustrated. And I want to get rid of them." So we came up with a program. We were able to put in this program over a 12-week period. We did 6 sessions, one every other week. And at the end of those 12 weeks, he comes up to me and says, "Chad, this was great. By the way, I've got a problem. I've got 20 I want to fire, and it's the 20 that I thought were good. Now that these guys have gone through this, these guys are great, and the other 20 need to go through the same thing. Can we start next week?" And that's exactly what we did. And so we went through another 12-week session, and we did 6 sessions over that and helped get those managers up to par and up to speed with where they needed to be. So I've been able to replicate that success over a
Mm.
number of companies, and I love doing that.
I'm so glad you shared that because whenever I hear adaptive HR solutions, I'm thinking about compliance. I'm thinking about employee relations. I wasn't really thinking about leadership development, which is a key piece. But you said one word that when I hear that word, it gives me chills. And you said joy. It gives you joy. And
Absolutely.
I love it whenever we call it, we find our lane. We really do find joy in everything we do. And so I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to put your link in the show notes if someone wants to learn a little bit more about adaptive HR solutions. then they can click that link. I know that there's going to be some people that are going to be asking you questions. Hey, let's before we get into, and I do want to talk about National SHRM because you're going to be speaking this year. You're going to be talking about ethics in HR. I definitely want to dive into that. But before we do that, I want to hear the Chad Sorenson story. Like, where did you grow up? And how in the world did you get into all of this, all business, all HR, all leadership?
I was born and raised in Minnesota. I
Oh,
loved it. I was, I'm blonde hair, much blonde, well, much more hair in the past as well, but blonder because I was born and raised up there. I spent, I went to school in Iowa,
mm,
and I happened to end up there at a little college called Morningside College in Sioux City, Iowa. That was by accident. I skipped sociology one day. I had to, in high school, I had to talk to a recruiter so I could get a pass out of the class because I didn't want to go to the class. Talked to a recruiter from Morningside College. He convinced me to visit, and I fell in love with the school, and that's where I ended up going to school.
mm,
And then one day, I was in the dorm room, and it was the beginning of my senior year, and my roommate had gotten a piece of paper from the department chair from the mass comm department because I was in communications, radio and television broadcasting is what I wanted to do.
mm,
He had thrown this flyer over by the trash and it missed the trash. So I saw it. And I said, "Hey, can I take a look at this?" He goes, "Sure, not a problem." Well, it was for a fellowship program with the International Radio and Television Society for a 10-week program out in New York City.
mm,
I applied for it, and he kept telling me every step of the application process, there's a lot of good people who apply
mm,
for this. And, you're coming from a small school in a small town, good luck. And I wish you luck. But remember, there's a lot of good people applying. And he said that after the second round, and he said that after the third round, and after the fourth round. And then finally, one day, I got to tell him, I said, "Eric, there are a lot of good opportunities in life. And sometimes we miss those opportunities because we think there are other people out there who are going to get it instead." So I
mm,
won a fellowship program, all expense paid trip to New York City, one of 19 people, and got to work with CBS News and the
mm.
show 48 Hours. I was in the broadcast headquarters for the summer. We got housing in NYU dorms. We got beer money, I mean food money every week. So we had a blast. And it was during those 10 weeks I said, I do not want to be in broadcasting, but I fell in love with the city. I moved out to New York City as soon as I was done. I turned around, came home, spent a week at home, and told my mom I'm moving out to New York. Moved out there, had a roommate, got a job, and that one day temp job turned into almost 7 years
Wow.
with one company,
Wow.
starting in public relations and then moving over to human resources.
That
So it
is
was, I skipped sociology one day my senior year in high school, and that led me to Jacksonville, Florida, where I am now,
that is,
through Iowa, through New York, through Connecticut, and then back down here. So,
man, I love
I,
that.
oh yeah, there's a lot of people who go into college and say I want to be in HR,
Yeah.
but there are more people who say I want to go do something else, and they end up in HR because that's where they've been called, and that's where I ended up. It was suggested I move from the public relations and corporate communications department of the Fortune 500 company I was working in
Yeah.
and go start a college recruiting program
Mm,
because we were doing college recruiting, but no one was really focusing on it. And
mm,
I was much younger then, 26 years ago now.
mhm,
And I started the program, got to do some of those things. And then through a merger of equals, where we were the unequal of the two equal partners, the lesser of the two equals, uh, I ended up moving down to Florida because my wife and I wanted to start a family. And all mine's in Minnesota and hers was in Florida. The decision wasn't that hard. Which way are we
mm,
going to go?
mm. I love that. I love all of it. There's so much here. Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm a big 48 hours fan. I mean, come on. But
I
I
mean,
love,
it was great. It was, I mean, this is pre-internet. This was 1993,
yeah,
and so I said, "How do you get your news stories for everything you do?"
yeah,
Well, they had big stacks every
yeah,
week of every Sunday paper from
yeah,
around the nation that was delivered, and we went through those, read through the stories, tried to
yeah.
find things in common, had ideas of what to look for,
Mm,
and I got to make my mark because my during that year, during 93, there was flooding on the Mississippi, which happens, every few years.
mm,
But there was a lot of flooding that was happening. And they
yeah.
said, "Well, look through here, see if you can find some stories." I said, "I'm from there. Can I make some phone calls?" And through the phone calls, I found a couple good stories and did everything. And in fact, I was the one who found out that the Des Moines water treatment plant was going underwater.
Wow.
And the water supply for the city of Des Moines in Iowa was going to be compromised, and was able to make some phone calls and actually had Dan Rather helicopter from one location to another 2 hours before the show because he wanted to go live there instead of the other place.
That is a great story.
It was
Oh
it
my
was awesome.
goodness.
It
I
was
love
awesome.
that. I love that. I should have known, I mean, with your voice that you've been in TV and radio. And I just think it's interesting, but I do want to, I want to get into what you're going to be speaking about, but I want to ask you this question because you mentioned that a lot of people don't feel like they, I don't know, you didn't say the word deserve, but deserve that opportunity. You said sometimes you got to think bigger, you got to believe in yourself. How did, like, where did that come from?
It's been something that I've always had. It's
Mm-hmm.
never pass up on an opportunity. Don't say, "Oh man, I wish I would have."
Mm,
You can always put yourself out there. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? They
yeah,
say thanks, but no. I
yeah.
mean, between my junior and senior year in college, I had to do an internship program because
Mm.
I was a communications major. Well, I was also a music major and studied opera theater, but that's a whole different story. And no, we're not going to sing today. Just want to set that out there right now. But I needed to do an internship program, and everyone was doing a radio or television station in Sioux City or Des Moines or Ames or the Twin Cities where I was from, up in Minneapolis, St. Paul
Mhm.
area.
Mm.
And that's where everyone was going to go do their internships. And I'm like, I want to do something different.
Yeah.
So I talked to some people. We had a sister college over in England, and I actually got to go do my internship at a radio station in Northwest England. And I got to spend a summer over there. I had to
Mhm.
fund it all myself, but I
Yeah.
was able to stay at the sister college over there. I did the internship at the radio station and worked in the advertising and in the news departments. I
Yeah.
also produced a promotional video for the college that I was staying at,
Yeah.
because they brought a lot of folks over from the continent, over from mainland Europe,
Mm.
to Edge Hill College there in England, in Ormskirk, England. And I was able to produce this video for them. And that's what I did for my internship. I created
Mm.
my own thing because I wanted to do something different.
I love that. Created your opportunity. That's fantastic. I love all of that. I do like to ask this question though. When okay, you started in television and radio, then you eventually moved into HR. Now you're running your own company. Was there a moment? Was there that moment where you said, you know what, I really found what I love doing? Because you mentioned the word earlier, joy. I found
Mm-hmm.
joy. Was there a moment, or were there moments that brought you joy in HR?
Two ways to look at it. I had a lot of joy when I was working in public relations and corporate communications,
Okay.
but that was at the very beginning of my career. And I got to do a lot of things that other people didn't get to do because I volunteered and I said,
Mm,
"Hey, let's do it." The other side of it is when the opportunity presented itself to move over to the human resource side
mm,
and to do it started off as recruiting. I jumped in full feet first,
mhm,
full force into it because that's what I wanted to learn it. I wanted to absorb it,
mm,
and I wanted to get good at it. And I was able to do that, and bringing those skills back down here to Florida when I moved down here after being told that I was no longer needed and being made available to the industry up there after the merger, where, by the way, 800 of us that happened to.
mhm,
Um, after moving down here, got into the HR side and learned different aspects of it. Thought maybe it was only going to be in a recruiting aspect, but then it grew into another job where I was hired as the recruiter, but I had to do everything HR. And
mm,
so I was able to do that and figure that out and just grew to love different parts of it.
yeah,
Now, as I've built my business also over 16 years, there are areas of my business or that I tried to do that I didn't find joy. I
mm,
don't do compensation plans.
mm,
That's not for me. I don't
mm,
do a lot of recruiting. That's not for me. I
mm,
will I will recommend other consultants. I'll bring in other people to do it. That's not what I want to do. And over time, it's figuring out what do you love to do? Because if you
mm,
love what you do, the old adage, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
mm,
And that's what I found. But I also looked at it and said, whatever I'm doing, I've either got to have joy in that or forget it. I got to go do something else.
mm,
So whether that's the volunteer stuff I did with
mm,
SHRM Jacksonville and then HR Florida, or I spent what was it, 10 years or 12 years as a leader with Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts,
mm.
which is where most of this went. I had 105 Cub Scouts,
Mm,
and that's first grade through fifth grade. And so I was the Cub Master, and I did that for
that's
6 or
awesome.
7 years.
That's
So
awesome.
that's
I love that.
a,
I
a
love
lot
that.
of things went out of me during that time. Oh
I
boy.
love that. I love that. I love that. Well, let's talk SHRM 2024. Hey,
Yeah.
hey, I do have a question. I mean, SHRM's coming to the Windy City, Chicago.
Mm.
I just love Chicago. I'm curious. You've been doing this for a long time. How many SHRM conferences have you attended?
See, I knew you were going to go down that road. 2013, hold on, 2013 in
Okay.
Chicago was my first one.
Okay.
Um, and I have been to every single one of them except for one since then.
Okay. Wow. And
Yep.
now you're circling
I
back to Chicago.
and then circling back to Chicago for the what third or fourth time or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So 11 of them. So this is 10. So this will be my 11th, I believe,
Yeah,
10th or
that's
11th.
fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about you're going to be speaking this year. Not only do you volunteer and you do a lot of stuff, but you're going to be speaking this year. And I wanted to get
Mhm.
you on the show today specifically to talk about your program. You're going to be talking about ethics in HR. I think it's going to be on Tuesday, the 25th. I think at 2 o'clock. Check the calendar for that. But
Check your local listings.
yeah, check your local listing. Uh, First question I have is what do you enjoy most about speaking? Because you do a lot of speaking.
Well, since my majors were radio and television broadcasting and then
Yeah,
music and an
yeah.
emphasis in opera theater, give me a microphone and a stage and I'm happy.
Mm,
I love speaking because I love to see a difference in
mm,
folks. I love
mm,
to see the change that happens. I love the interaction that I get when I am up there presenting
mm,
and giving information, and the feedback that I get, either the immediate feedback of the heads nodding or the agreeing or the raising of
mm.
hands, but it's also the feedback that I get afterward when people come up to me and want to continue the conversation. That's what I love about that, is because there's a topic that has interested them. And I'm fairly dynamic. I'm fairly, out there, and I can keep people's attention.
Yeah.
When I go speak at a SHRM or a state council conference, I'm often the after lunch speaker
Mm.
because I can keep their attention right after the food is then sitting in there and it's starting to make them fall asleep. But I can keep that energy up there with them,
Yeah.
keep them engaged. And I love that aspect of it. I mean, part of it is it goes back to entertaining.
Yeah.
It's fulfilling a role,
Mm.
and that's what I get to do. And this time I'm talking about ethics.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that we need to talk about. That's
Mm-hmm.
important to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on your certification, you may need an ethics credit for your
Yep.
certification.
Yep.
So it's one of those that's important, but it's also important for us to take this and bring this back into our own workplaces and to our own lives.
Yeah, that's so good. Ethics in HR. I love it. It's going to be June the 25th. Hey,
Yep.
let me ask you this. Why ethics in HR? You mentioned, yes, they can get a credit for that, but why is that important for you? I mean, what do you, without giving your presentation away, what are some of
Sure.
the things you're going to talk about? Because when I think about ethics, I think about our values that are hanging on the wall, and are we in alignment with that, or a lot of different things. We see all of these celebrities, they're one day they're one person, the next day they're the other person because
Mm-hmm.
of a choice they made. But in HR, in business, what are you some of the things you're going to be talking about?
Well, one of the things is I make a distinction, or I ask the question: is there a difference between personal ethics and business ethics?
Mm,
And some people, there can be two very different camps. There are some people who say absolutely there's a difference between personal and business,
okay.
and the other side that says there's not a difference between personal and business. John Maxwell, who's put out 1,000 books, talks about the fact that there shouldn't be a difference between personal and business ethics.
Yeah.
Because if you're
Right.
not ethical outside there, well, I'm ethical in business because it's business.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not how you treat people outside, or the opposite. I'm
Yeah.
very ethical outside, but inside, hey, business is cutthroat. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Well, no, this isn't the Wolf of Wall Street,
Yeah.
and this isn't trying to get ahead at all
Yeah.
costs. I think the other thing, one of the reasons why this is important for me, is because guilt by association.
Mm,
If someone else in HR somewhere does something wrong, all of HR is bad. Just look at
mm,
TikTok, or just
yeah.
take a look at Facebook, or any video out there, where they go through and they rail against the horrors of going to human resources because everyone in HR is bad.
Mm,
you know it's that feeling. It's just like when we say, everyone who's a Gen Xer or a Gen Z or a millennial or whatever, we can't clump everyone together. And the
mm,
problem is that when there are people in HR who do things wrong, who do things that they shouldn't be doing, it
mm,
gives everyone in HR a bad name.
mm,
It's the same thing that happens with police.
mm,
Someone does something wrong somewhere,
mm.
everyone's bad in the police,
Yeah.
and it's not true.
Yeah.
And so part of it is helping folks understand, why is this important?
Yeah.
And I talk about, without giving the whole thing away, but I talk about avoiding the line in the sand. Our goal shouldn't be to see how far we can lean over the line without stepping over.
Mm.
Our goal is to make sure we know where it is and we don't get anywhere near
I
it.
like that.
People will judge you based on what their perception of you is, not necessarily exactly everything that you've done.
I think a lot of times too, we are in situations, many HR managers, directors, VPs, and the leader of the organization is a little bit over the line, and you got to
Mhm.
figure out, where do I go from there? I'm sure you're going to talk about some of those strategies as well, right?
Absolutely. And I've done that before, whether it's with clients or whether it's people I've worked directly with, where I will say to them, "Hey, I'm here because I'm in human resources
Yeah.
and I am on your side, but I'm on the employee side." And I
Yeah.
will tell the employee when they're wrong and the employer's right, and I'll tell the employer when they're wrong and the employee's right.
Yeah.
Because we want to be able to have this great relationship. And
Mm.
it takes both sides to make that relationship right.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get a business owner or someone who, wants to push that line a little bit.
Mm.
My
Mm.
job, I see, is to make sure they understand where it is and what I believe is the right thing to do.
Mm.
But it's not my company. So I can't tell them what to do. I can recommend what they do, and then sometimes people say, well, if they cross the line, you should just walk away.
Mm.
Well, there's a different thought to that as well. And the other thought is, well, who's then helping protect those that are still
Mm.
there?
Mm.
Who's helping with those employees that are still there?
Mm.
And I had a boss at one company, and obviously won't mention who it was, but I said, if you don't agree with me, that's fine. It's not my company, it's yours.
Yeah.
However, if you don't do something that I think should be done, or you're doing something that I don't think should be done, um, I will let you know that.
Mm.
And by the way, I'm going to write you a get out of jail free card. I'm going to write you a memo that I'm just going to give to you.
Yeah.
It'll be typed, it'll be handwritten, it'll be printed and then gone. But I'm going to give you a memo that says, this is why I disagree and why I think it's wrong. And
Mm.
should this ever blow up, I'm going to pull it out
Mm.
and say this is what happened. But I justified staying with that organization for a long period of time because I was there also helping make sure the other people that were working there got a fair chance and a
Mm.
fair shake. And it helped. And over time,
Yeah.
very rarely did I ever have to do that. If it was something I had
Yeah.
to do on a regular basis, I couldn't do that. I couldn't justify doing that. But I didn't have to do it on a regular basis. Every once in a while, opinions differ. Oh, by the way, this is when we could actually talk about differences of opinion without yelling and screaming at each other. I don't see that much anymore.
Civil
Oh,
conversations. I think
civil.
we're
Hey,
having we're having civil conversations these days.
I,
One of
I, I think an organization should really promote civility and having civil conversations. Is this
I
one of
love
1
that.
million?
We're having 101 million. I
There
love
you
that.
go.
Okay, mark it down.
There you
One
go.
of the things I really enjoy when I go to a conference is hearing a speaker that's lived through these experiences. Obviously, you have these great experiences, and when you've lived through them, you have great stories. I was actually just thinking about when you were talking earlier about working for CBS. I just got through watching a Netflix documentary on Dan Rather, and they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about ethics, right? Crossing the
Yep.
line, different things like that. And so sometimes those lines are very blurry, but I think whenever you are, when you have all the information that you need, you're basically saying, hey, I'm going to equip you, right?
Right.
To be informed, to make the decisions you need to make, but then it's up to you to make those choices, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of those things that, the unceremonious exit of Dan
Yeah.
from CBS. I mean, I got to meet him a couple times while I was there. Plus, we had Dan Rather speak at the HR Florida conference,
Hmm.
so I got to chat with him and talk with him and let him know that I used to be there. Now, I wasn't the one who reminded him that I said some things that he got upset with, but they were all true. Like the first time I met him, and I didn't realize he was
Yeah.
sitting in the room, and he says, and where do you think you're going? As I told the executive producer I was leaving for the day, and I said, well, I'm actually heading over to ABC to go meet Peter Jennings and watch World News tonight. And so I had a conversation with the
Yeah.
executive producer the next day. I'm a 20-something-year-old smart aleck kid, and she says, why'd you say that? I said, he asked me where I was going.
Yeah.
That's where I was going, because I wasn't part of CBS News. I was a part of the International Radio and Television Society. And that's where the 19 of us were there from.
Yeah.
And we got placed all over. And some folks are actually still out in broadcasting and doing that. You know,
Yeah.
a good friend of mine is a correspondent for Fox News
Yeah.
on the west side of
I
the
love that.
country.
I love that.
And she's still doing it. We were both at CBS.
I love that. So if you are going to SHRM-24, be sure and sign up for Chad's session, Ethics and HR. Chad, I want to ask you this before I shift over to another area, and that is when the conference is over, everybody's gone home. What are you like hoping people will get from your session? What are you hoping that one takeaway is?
That someone who's having a difficult time trying to decide, what should I do, or should I stay with this organization? Is it worth staying with the organization?
Yeah.
Or if my boss tells me to cross the lines, should I really do that? I hope I
Mm,
help clear the conscience to say, you need to do what's right ethically. You need to do what's right for you. But
mm,
by doing that, you know, we're not compromising what we do, but
mm,
sometimes it's just speaking the truth. And like you mentioned before, hey, it's your decision, you know, to a business owner or to a senior manager, it's your decision. My goal is to make sure that you're educated on, you know, the ramifications. It's just like when we took our SHRM-CP or SCP or the SPHR or PHR, you know, when you, particularly when you take the upper level, the senior level tests, all four answers can be right. What
right.
is the best way to operate? What is the best
Mm,
way to do things
mm.
to get the result that you're looking for?
That's a great example. I love that. So I will put all of the information in the show notes if you want to check out Chad's session. Hey, I do want to just real touch on, you mentioned volunteering. I always like to talk about volunteering because there's a lot of people out there that they say, I want to volunteer, or they have good intentions, but they just haven't been able to step over the line. How is volunteering? I mean, obviously you've served as president of the local chapter, president of HR Florida. Uh, how has that helped you in your, I would say, job, your career, your life?
Yeah,
How does volunteering help?
it provides an outlet. It provides a give back.
Mm,
You know, it was about 8 years ago, or 10 years ago, I forget exactly when, I heard a speaker talk about personal mission statements.
mm,
And by the way, I include this sometimes now in leadership development series for companies.
okay.
And we talk about personal mission statements, or what does it mean to be you? And I came up with my 5 keys to success. What are the things that I fall back on, my mantra? And
Mm,
those are devotion to God,
mm-hmm,
dedication to family, continuous service, lifetime learning, and always remembering to laugh. And
mm,
I can put anything that I do into those buckets and say, where does this fit in there? And if it fits in there, then I'm doing the right thing. And one of those is continuous service. And it's there because I always want to be giving back. You know, my wife knows that I will never just be sitting by the pool day in and day out doing nothing, because I
mm,
can't do that. I need to be doing something. You
mm,
know, I do like downtimes. Don't get me wrong. Sitting on a cruise ship with a book in my hand and a drink in the other hand, I'm perfectly happy. But I want to be giving back. So
yeah.
it's been through the HR profession, and
Mm,
that started a long time ago. It was after I moved here. I had already been a part of SHRM, but then joined the local chapter and volunteered to be a committee member. Well,
mm.
within 3 months, I was the director of that committee because the director left. And then within a few years, I moved up into the ranks of the executive committee of SHRM Jacksonville, and then on into to HR Florida. But you know, so where can I give back? What can I do? And for me, it's what's been important for me, because I want to give back to things. So there's
Mm,
3 main areas that I've given back. One is scouts. I was a Cub Scout. I was a Boy Scout. I'm an Eagle Scout. In scouting, there's the Order of the Arrow, and I was a Vigil Honor member. I started training and writing training when I was 14 or 15 years old,
mm,
and I was doing it on a national level for scouts.
mm,
And I was doing presentations. My parents would say all through high school, "Where are you going this weekend?" "Oh, Colorado Springs." "Where are you going this weekend?" "Indianapolis." You know, "How are you
mm,
getting there?" What? You know, and I explained, that's what I'm doing. I'm already on the circuit. I've been on the circuit since I've
yeah.
been a teenager, speaking and
Yeah.
training. So scouting has been very important to me. And when my boys were old enough to join, they joined, and they went through and they spent their time within scouts. Another area has been HR, giving
Mm,
back to my own profession. And I want to give back to my profession. And I want to be able to do that. And I've really enjoyed being able to do that.
mm,
Another area has been my church. And wherever I've been involved in the church, not only singing, but also involved in leadership of the church, and not just the HR committee, not just the staff parish relations committee. And I've been part of one church plant and now starting a new church plant. And so it's building it from the ground up and figuring out where do we go from here. And then the fourth area that I'm involved in is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We lost my son, Sean, 7.5 years ago to suicide. He's forever 15. And so that's something that's important for us. And so that's a give back that Georgia and I do in two different ways. First, supporting that organization. And one year, unbeknownst to me, the conference team for HR Florida decided that our charity for that year was going to be the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Oh.
And so we were able to raise over 2 days or 3 days, $14,000 for AFSP.
Oh,
and so awesome. it was one of those things that was critically important for us. The other way that we volunteer for that is when someone else loses a child, we're there for the family. I'm there for dad. George is there for mom, because they're going through something they've never experienced, never planned on. And we had people there for us who had gone through it. So we want to be there for people who have gone through it as well. So whether it's someone who's local here or one of my HR folks who know someone else who's been through it, they'll give me a call at 10 o'clock at night and say, hey, this happened. Can I give them your information? And the answer is always yes. We'd love to be able to talk with them when they're ready, in their time, when they want to reach out.
Man, my heart is full, man.
So
thank you for sharing.
And that. It's it would be my son's 23rd birthday on the day that I actually do this presentation up at SHRM.
Oh man. Well, I'm sorry, and I love the significance though of these organizations that are there to serve. I met Martha, and I've met many others at HR Florida. Just terrific, just a terrific organization, and just to be part of that, I'm sure that just gives you even more joy. Just
absolutely.
To be, especially, you talk about the scouts, you talk about HR, you talk about church, and just all of the different ways you give them back. I love how you talked about though the personal mission statement in the leadership development, because I think that's one of the things that we all think about, but we don't necessarily even write it down. We're just like, and I love how you talked about these five. You talked about God, family, service, learning, and the last one was laughing. I love that. I love that fifth one, laughing. And I'm sure you get great joy whenever you hear people laugh along the way.
I do, and I love to make people laugh. My presentations, no matter what the topic is. I mean, I've got one topic, the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of accounting for the HR professional, and I make people laugh in the most boring topic I could think of. And I get that there. In fact, that was the first presentation my son ever heard. My other son, Jonathan, who's now 19, is the first one he heard. And this was, 5, 6 years ago. So he's 13, 14 years old. And he goes, Dad, that was really interesting. You kept me interested. I was like, well, thanks. I appreciate it. He goes, now can we go out for ice cream like you promised? Yeah. Okay, yes.
Well, speaking as a skill, and you obviously have a great skill. I can't wait. I'm planning on joining your session. I can't wait to be part of that. I will put all the information in the show notes so people can check out Chad's presentation, Ethics in HR. It sounds like it, and it is something we talk about, but we don't talk about it, right? Correct. It's just something that needs to be out there. But I'm sure that you're going to make it very, not only informative, but very entertaining along the way. And I think that's what gives people joy also whenever they attend a conference. So I can't wait for hey, I always like to ask my guests on the show before I go into it's time to accelerate. I just like to ask, you've given some great advice today, but I always like to ask, were you ever given any advice in your childhood, from your family, during your career, that it's just so good, you just find yourself sharing that advice often?
I look back at my grandfather and my dad, and when I was growing up, they owned a feed store. Okay. So we sold feed to farmers. We also had 2,500 laying hens. So we had a lot of eggs we collected every single day. And each week they delivered eggs to all the restaurants on the east side of St. Paul. And I saw my grandfather and my dad working really hard. And then after they sold that business, after it moved to a couple different locations and they opened up a second store and everything else, I continue to see them working really hard, and I never saw my dad take some downtime. And in fact, he's retired and still doesn't slow down. He now builds Adirondack chairs, and he's redoing his house on the lake in central Minnesota, and everything else. So I see that, and I saw that hard work and that work ethic, and saw what they could do.
Mm.
And where I'm happy now is that I see my son who's 19 years old. Everyone says, where are they going to college? I'm like, oh, you don't understand. We want him to graduate from high school. That's where our focus is. And he did. And he wants to do something that he has a passion for. He has a passion for cars. So after working at Publix for a while, and then after working at a restaurant for a while, I said, go find something in the field that you're passionate about. So he went to go start working at Discount Tire. Well, he then got promoted to assistant manager at age 19 and got moved to another location because they needed that skill set there. And so I see him, and his biggest complaint is when others aren't working hard enough.
Mm.
People say millennials or Gen Zers or whatever are, they're trying to do as little as possible. That's not my son.
Mm.
First, it's not in him to do that.
Mm.
Well, unless of course we've asked him to do something, and then it's his parents who ask him, and that's one thing. By the way, he knows that I talk about him on a regular basis. But on the other side, he gets frustrated when his coworkers aren't doing enough, and he'll be out there and he'll motivate them. He'll get them excited. He'll say, "Hey, come on, let's do this. Let's focus on these last 5 cars that just came in right before we closed. Let's get them knocked out and make sure everyone's happy as they're leaving." The other side of the reason he's motivated to do that is because his hobby is cars, and he's got a project car, and most people who have a project car have a running car as well. That's not him, so he always has to keep his project car running, which costs money, so he needs to be able to afford to be able to do that. So you take a look at that advice. The advice was what my grandfather and my dad did that showed me what I needed to do, and I know that I've been able to carry that on because I see that in my son.
Yeah. 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 I heard the quote one time, teach always, and sometimes you use words.
Exactly.
And that's what they did. They taught you, and that's what I see in my father, the value of hard work. And I tell people all the time when they're talking about success, we talk about a lot of different things. I say, hey, don't forget, people that have tremendous success, they work really hard. And don't discount that. This has been so much fun. I could do this like all day. I'm going to shift to it's time to accelerate. Where I'm going to ask you a few fun questions. You mentioned you've been to, I don't know, 10, 11 SHRM conferences, Chicago a few times. What's your favorite city for a SHRM conference? Any favorites?
It has to either be New Orleans because I love New Orleans. I love the food. I love the nightlife there, or it's got to be Vegas because I love the food. I love the nightlife and all the different things. And either place you can go time and time again and not do the same thing twice.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. One of my favorites was New Orleans. That was fantastic. I love that. What's one thing that really energizes you when going to a SHRM conference?
Getting to see all the people from around the country that I don't get to see on a regular basis. Because of my role that I had as president of HR Florida for 2 years, the president-elect before that, we bring the entire executive committee to every SHRM National Conference from the state. And so I've been able to build these relationships with folks, whether they're in California, whether they're up in Montana, North Dakota, up in the Northeast, or Louisiana or Texas. It's great to be able to see everyone. I enjoy it because I get to go see all these people that I know that I haven't been able to see, but we've stayed connected online, but it's great to see someone and give them a hug.
I love that. People energize us. Hey, got a couple more questions. What's one thing that you always find yourself doing at a SHRM conference?
Trying to find someone who doesn't know their way and helping them find something that's going to be helpful for them. It's the person who's the first time they're there, they're looking around like this and they're like, I cannot believe there's so many people here. Whether that's when it was really small in 2021 or whether that is, last year when we had over 20,000 people there in Las Vegas. It's trying to find someone new, get to know them and get to know who they are.
I love that. In my book, Life in the Leadership Lane, I say great leaders are grateful leaders. What are you grateful for, Chad?
I'm grateful for my relationship with God. I'm grateful for my family and the support they have of me, and I'm grateful that the clients that I work with keep coming back to me, and I've had long-term relationships. And in fact, my longest relationship with a client ever since starting my business 16 years ago has been 18 years.
Oh, that's
or
great.
19 years, because I started it well before I started my own company.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That feels good, doesn't it? Last question, final question. Chad, 10 years older, is around the corner and he's knocking at your door. You're going to answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
Where'd your hair go? No. Uh, he's going to say, keep doing what you're doing, because what you're doing is right, because you keep evolving, you keep changing, and you keep honing the edge. Steel sharpens steel, and what we want to do is keep getting better at what we're doing. Over 16 years of my business, you start to try to be everything to everyone all the time. And you learn where your passion is and where your focus is, and you keep bringing it in there. And over my career, and I can imagine that I'm going to continue doing that, is keep honing it down to what I really love to do, because when you're passionate, you love it, you're great at it.
That is a wise 10 years older Chad Sorenson. I cannot wait to see you in Chicago. SHRM Conference is coming up June the 23rd through the 26th. Chad's going to be speaking on Tuesday, Ethics in HR. You definitely want to catch that. Hey, by the way, I was going to mention this before we go here. I have a bucket list, or life list, you can call it, of all the states that I'm trying to visit, and Minnesota's still on my list. I've got to get to Minnesota.
Hey, go up during the summer when the weather's nice and when the fish are biting. And my parents will always have a place for you. They live right on the lake, and that's where they retired. And
hey, I'm Bruce.
It's
Chad
great.
sent me.
Hey, by the way, Bruce is my father's name. So Bruce, meet Bruce. So it works out just fine.
That's fantastic. This has been so much fun. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective. I can't wait to see you in Chicago. Hey, for those who heard you and they want to connect with you before or after the conference, maybe they're not going to the conference, they just want to connect with you and learn more about something you shared today, maybe that leadership development. What's the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, on any of the socials, I'm very easy to find. It's usually CV Sorenson or Chad V Sorenson, V for Vincent, or through my website, adaptivehrs.com. Or if you forget everything else, just look for HR Florida, and you can connect with me through there as well.
I love that. I cannot wait to share this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks,
I appreciate your friendship.
Absolutely. You too.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll talk to you later.
All right.